Imagine returning a single 100 yen coin to a police station. Not because anyone was watching, not because it mattered to anyone but you, but because keeping it, even by accident, felt indistinguishable from theft. That's the kind of honest Nao Kanzaki is. The kind most people grow out of somewhere around adolescence, once the world starts teaching them exactly how expensive the truth can get. Now never learned that lesson, and in a few minutes, a stranger is going to hand her a suitcase holding 100 million yen and tell her the only way to keep it is to become someone she has never once let herself be, someone who can look another person in the eye and lie to them without her voice giving her away. That's Nao. In the opening minutes of Liar Game, about to discover that being unable to lie isn't a virtue in every room she walks into. Sometimes it's just the easiest kind of person to rob. People who know now call her stupidly honest, which sounds like an insult because, in the world she's about to be dropped into, it is one. Then, on an otherwise unremarkable day, a package shows up at her door with no return address, and inside it is more money than she's ever seen in her life, along with a letter informing her that she has been selected for something called the Liar Game Tournament. The rules read almost like paperwork, the kind of language designed to make something enormous sound routine. She'll be paired against a single opponent holding an equal sum. In 30 days, she has to return the full amount to a tournament representative. If she loses her money to her opponent, their debt becomes her debt. If she manages to take theirs instead, she keeps everything. No split, no mercy. That's the mechanism. But the actual trap isn't explained in the letter at all. It's sitting in the next envelope, which arrives the following day and tells her exactly who she'll be facing across the table. Her opponent is Fujisawa Kazuo, her own middle school teacher from years ago. The man she remembers as kind, as someone who looked out for her when she was a child who genuinely needed looking out for. So when a second letter names him as her round one opponent, she doesn't feel dread. She feels relieved. Of everyone this tournament could have handed her, it gave her someone she already trusts completely. And because trust is the only language Nao actually speaks, she goes straight to him for help instead of running from him. Fujisawa doesn't turn her away. He does something worse. He tells her, gently, that the tournament plays tricks on people, that sometimes a letter will arrive claiming your opponent has already stolen from you, purely to make you panic and hand your money over out of fear. It's a strange thing to warn someone about before anything has actually happened, and Nao, who has no instinct for strange, files it away as one more reason to trust him. Together, they agree the safest move is to lock both fortunes away in a bank deposit box until the deadline passes. She even tells him exactly where her money is hidden in her apartment. He suggests, since the paperwork apparently requires it, that he handle the deposit himself. Days pass with no word from him. Now, worried she's imposed on his time, decides to stop by his house, not to check on the money, but simply to apologize for the trouble she's caused him. She knocks. Nobody answers the door, so she walks around toward the garden, and that's where she hears his voice, low and pleased with itself, on the phone with someone she can't see. He's laughing about how easy it was, about how a girl too foolishly honest to suspect her own teacher makes for the softest target in the world, about the 100 million yen sitting exactly where he wants it. She doesn't confront him. She just leaves, and when she gets home, a letter from the tournament is already waiting, the real one this time, the one confirming what she just heard with her own ears. Fujisawa's warning about fake letters wasn't protection. It was insurance, a lie planted in advance so that the truth, when it finally arrived, would sound like the very trick he'd already taught her not to believe. She cries. And then she does the only thing that makes sense to a mind built entirely around trust that has just been proven a liability. She goes looking for someone who has none left to spend. A call to her lawyer, Tanimura, asking, almost embarrassed to say it out loud, whether there's any way to meet someone who actually knows how to lie for a living, leads to a name. An ex-convict being released from prison in 2 days. A man named Shinichi Akiyama. He's not what she expects, and he's not interested in her problem. Not at first. A girl who handed 200 million yen to a man she hadn't spoken to in a decade isn't a client to him. She's a headache wearing a good conscience. But Nao doesn't perform desperation, because she's never learned how to perform anything at all. She's simply there, again and again, Patient in a way that starts to look less like naivety and more like conviction, and part of what makes that persistence so hard for him to shake off is what's sitting underneath it, unspoken. Now doesn't have many people left to call. Her only real family is a father whose health has been failing for longer than she likes to talk about, which means the isolation she's carrying into all of this isn't incidental to the story. It's the reason she has nobody to warn her, nobody to catch the small. Tells Fujisawa never bothered to hide from anyone paying closer attention. Eventually, reluctantly, Akiyama agrees to help her. Neither of them knows yet how much that single decision is about to cost the both of them taking it. It's the first lie she's ever told with intent behind it, and it works exactly the way Akiyama needs it to, because a man that confident in his own cleverness can't resist watching the girl he fooled try and fail to fight back. What Fujisawa doesn't understand, standing there enjoying the show, is that the declaration was never meant to threaten him. It was meant to buy time, to keep him watching Nao while the real work happened somewhere he wasn't looking. While Fujisawa is busy being entertained by her, Akiyama is doing the actual work. He's already worked out, from nothing but Fujisawa's habits and movements, that the money never went anywhere near a bank, which means it's still in the house, somewhere close enough to check on constantly, because a man like Fujisawa can't resist looking at what he's stolen. Akiyama confirms the room by smoking the house out and watching exactly where Fujisawa runs first to protect what matters, the main room. Behind the wall, a safe. When Akiyama and Nao finally confront him with what they know, Fujisawa doesn't panic. He opens the safe himself, almost proud, daring them to try something against a man who's already won once. Akiyama's answer is the coldest line of the episode. It doesn't matter. He's taking it anyway, and the certainty in how he says it is the first real crack in Fujisawa's confidence. The first moment he understands, even faintly, that the man across from him has already finished the game he thinks is only just starting. And that's where the story stops being about a betrayed student and starts being about a heist. The doorbell rings. A man claiming to represent the tournament arrives to formally collect the winnings, and Fujisawa, greedy for the satisfaction of watching his prize get counted in front of him, hands it over without a second thought. Minutes later, 3 more officials show up, the real ones this time. And when Fujisawa mentions the colleague who already came and went, the room goes still. There was no earlier visit. Not from them. That first man was Akiyama in disguise, and by the time the real officials arrive, he's already gone with all 200 million. Because he swapped the true 6 o'clock deadline for a fake 5 o'clock card, just long enough to convince Fujisawa he'd already won and could afford to gloat instead of guard. Even Nao didn't know it was happening while it happened. That's the part that stings the most. Watching it unfold, Akiyama didn't only deceive Fujisawa, he kept his own partner in the dark too. Because letting her believe they'd already lost was the only way to guarantee she'd react like someone who genuinely had. Nao is declared the winner. 100 million yen, hers by right, taken from the man who tried to erase her. And then she gives half of it straight back to him. Not forgiveness, just an unwillingness to leave anyone, even him, buried under a debt that size. Akiyama, unreadable as ever, quietly does the same with his own share, and neither of them explains why, because the reason isn't the kind of thing either of them knows how to say out loud yet. She thinks it's finally over. She walks Akiyama home to repay him with the only money she actually has left, 50,000 yen, saved from working, and finds a second envelope waiting at her door instead of a quiet evening. Round 2 has already been decided for her, whether she's ready for it or not. And the letter makes one thing brutally clear before she even opens it fully. Walking away now costs almost as much as losing would, because the tournament has already learned something about her from round 1 that it plans to exploit again, that she pays what she owes, that she keeps her word even to people who have never once kept theirs to her, and that a person like that rarely walks away from a debt no matter how badly she wants to. Akiyama tells her not to go, leaves her his number, tells her to call if she needs him, and walks away, the closest thing to a warning either of them will get from him. But her lawyer Tanimura tells her something else entirely. Go to the venue, threaten the organization with legal consequences, and force them to release her for good. It sounds reasonable, right up until she arrives and discovers that the man running the entire event is Tanimura himself, not her lawyer at all. but a tournament operative who has been quietly steering her from the very beginning, without her ever once suspecting it. 22 players are already seated by the time she walks in. A masked figure named Leronira steps forward to explain the new game. Minority rule. Every round, the group answers a binary question, yes or no, and whoever lands on the smaller side survives while everyone in the majority is eliminated and buried in debt. It sounds simple enough to be a coin flip. It isn't. And just as Leronira starts laying out the finer print, the doors open, and Akiyama walks back in not because he changed his mind about letting her face this alone, but because someone else already tried this game, lost badly, and Akiyama is willing to inherit that debt just to earn himself a seat at the table. He doesn't explain himself when he sits down next to her. He doesn't need to. The fact that he came back at all is explanation enough, and it's the first moment in this story where Nao stops being someone Akiyama is helping out of obligation and starts being someone he's chosen to stand beside. His plan for surviving the round sounds almost too simple to work. Build an 8-person alliance, split it exactly in half on every vote, and guarantee that half the group always lands in the minority, regardless of the question. Everyone signs an agreement to share the winnings equally, which means nobody has a reason to defect early. It's the kind of plan that looks unbreakable on paper, which is usually the first sign, in this story, that it's about to be tested by someone who was never planning to play by the group's math to begin with. What the Alliance actually asks of its members is the same thing every safety net in this story ends up asking. Total, immediate trust in strangers, whose names they learned an hour earlier. Nao believes it will hold, because she wants to believe people keep their word. Akiyama believes it will hold, because he's built the consequences of breaking it precisely enough that keeping it becomes the only rational choice left. Those are two very different reasons to trust the same 7 strangers, and only one of them is built to survive contact with someone who was never doing the group's math at all. There's a name already circling the room before the first vote is even cast. Player X, someone inside this crowd of 22 who has apparently rigged an outcome nobody else can see coming, and now spends every round watching the wrong man, convinced the danger is sitting somewhere in plain sight, when it's actually standing exactly where nobody's looking. Her name is Yuji Fukunaga, a trans woman, a 5th-degree black belt, and, as it turns out, the single most dangerous mind in the room, outside of Akiyama himself. While the larger alliance holds its shape on the surface, Fukunaga is quietly building something smaller underneath it, pulling in 2 other players, Miura and Player 15, aiming for an outcome that guarantees she alone walks away untouched no matter which way the group's vote falls. It works, for a while, because nobody in that room is watching her the way they watch the quiet, suspicious-looking man everyone's already decided must be hiding something. Everything about how Fukunaga moves through this game traces back to the same root. A lifetime spent being underestimated the moment she walks into a room. And a decision, somewhere along the way, to stop fighting that assumption and start weaponizing it instead. Nobody suspects her first, because suspecting her would require actually seeing her. And this tournament has already proven, twice over, that most people would rather police who looks dangerous than notice who actually is. Here, for the first time, that same blind spot becomes the sharpest tool she owns. When she finally reveals herself as X, she does it the way a magician reveals a trick they're certain nobody in the audience can reverse engineer, laying out exactly how she rigged the count and made herself impossible to catch. It should be checkmate, and for a moment, even Nao believes it is. But Akiyama already knows. He caught the mistake that exposed her plan the instant she made it, and instead of acting on it immediately, he let her walk further out onto a branch that was never going to hold. Because the value of information in this game isn't in having it, it's in choosing exactly when to spend it, only after your opponent has already committed. When the final vote comes, Akiyama does something that looks, on its surface, like surrender. He shows the room his ballot before it's counted. In a game built entirely on concealment, that should be suicide. Instead, it's the last move in a trap that's been closing for 2 full episodes, and it's the moment Fukunaga's certainty collapses in real time, in front of everyone she was sure she'd already beaten. Minority rule ends there. The debts settle where they settle. And instead of celebrating, Akiyama tells Nao something that sounds less like victory and more like the opening line of a war, that he's going to find whoever built this organization, whoever takes pleasure in forcing desperate people to destroy each other for sport. Then he disappears. No calls, no contact. A full week of silence she has no way to break. It's Tanimura, the same man who lied his way into her trust once already, who finally tells her who Akiyama really is. He was a criminal psychology graduate at Taito University before any of this. Someone who had every option available to a mind that sharp and chose, instead, a path that ended in a prison cell. His mother was driven to suicide by a multi-level marketing scheme that fed on people exactly as desperate as Nao was the day that first envelope arrived, promising them a way out and delivering only debt dressed up as opportunity. Akiyama's answer to that grief wasn't grief at all. It was a plan precise enough to bankrupt the entire company from the inside, followed by a prison sentence he served without once regretting the trade. Nao sits with the truth and says nothing, because there's nothing left to say to a man who has spent his whole life punishing the exact kind of manipulation she keeps walking straight into, unarmed, every single time. She thought she understood who was protecting her. She's only just found out why he does it. She could stop here. She has the money. She could let Akiyama vanish into whatever war he's decided to fight on his own, and no one watching would blame her for it. She doesn't, and that decision drags her straight into the downsizing game, the revival round for everyone. Minority rule left in debt, held in an abandoned bowling alley that feels less like a venue and more like a place things get quietly discarded once nobody needs them anymore. 9 players, all owing the tournament everything they have, are handed 2 kinds of currency. M tickets, worth 100 million yen each and spendable on almost anything inside the game, and L tickets, used to vote on who gets downsized, eliminated permanently, buried under a debt that doesn't come back from a second chance. Fukunaga is here too, and whatever lesson losing to Akiyama was supposed to teach her hasn't taken root at all. She exposes Nao's winnings from the previous round in front of the entire group, turning every player's suspicion onto her within seconds, and then, in the very same breath, tells Nao it was never a betrayal, that this was always meant to look like an attack, so the two of them could quietly win together underneath everyone's notice. Whether that's true is impossible to know while it's happening, which is exactly the kind of uncertainty Fukunaga has learned to live inside, comfortable in a way most people never manage to be with not knowing which version of themselves they're presenting from one moment to the next. What isn't in question is what she does to Miura, the same man she used as cover during minority rule. Discarded. The moment he stops being useful, the clearest picture yet of what Fukunaga actually is underneath the charisma. Someone who reads people not to understand them, but to calculate exactly how much weight they can bear before they break. Nao's vote count sits at 0 deep into the game, which in this tournament isn't just a bad position, it's a death sentence with a clock attached to it. So when Fukunaga offers her a way out, a private one-on-one wager, 30 of Fukunaga's votes against 30 million of Nao's yen, decided by a card game supposedly built on nothing but luck, the offer means exactly what every offer in this story has meant so far. Nothing here runs on luck. Every game that looks random is a psychological test wearing a disguise, and the real contest was never the cards on the table. It's whether Nao has learned enough. After everything Fujisawa took from her, and everything Fukunaga has already shown her twice, to stop mistaking a kind offer for a safe one, because in this tournament, the two have never once been the same thing. And every player who's assumed otherwise has already paid for the mistaken debt that follows them into the next round. She sits down to play anyway, not because she's forgotten what Fukunaga is capable of, but because refusing to play costs her the same amount that losing would. And at some point in this story, refusing to move forward stops being caution and starts being just another way to lose. By the time the votes finally settle, Akiyama tells her something that sounds almost gentle and isn't. What most people call trust is often nothing more than a refusal to actually look at someone closely enough to see what they're capable of. And choosing to doubt people isn't cruelty. Sometimes it's the only honest response to what you've already been shown, over and over, by people who had every chance to prove you wrong. Nao doesn't argue with him this time, and that quiet, unwilling agreement might be the real turning point of the whole season so far, more than any single game she's won, because for the first time since the letter with her name on it first arrived, she's not just surviving what people do to her, she's starting to see it coming. Round 3 doesn't wait for her to finish processing any of it. It's called the contraband game, and it splits the remaining players into 2 teams, the northern country and the southern country, each holding a card that draws money from an ATM sitting inside the other side's territory. Every round, one team sends a smuggler across the border carrying a briefcase, while the other team puts forward a customs inspector whose only job is to guess correctly whether that briefcase is empty or worth a fortune. It plays like a border checkpoint and reads like a minefield, because the only reliable way to win is to get someone inside the enemy's own walls to sell out their teammates before the case is ever packed. Minority rule wearing a different disguise, except this time the betrayal isn't hidden inside a vote. It's hidden inside a relationship. A dealer named Nirko oversees the round, watching from the sidelines the way a man watches a fire he already knows exactly how far will spread. Because every team playing this game eventually learns the same lesson the hard way. The fastest route to losing is trusting your own side completely. And the fastest route to winning is making sure somebody on the enemy's side trusts you more than they trust the people standing next to them. And into that round walks the person this entire season has quietly been building toward. His name is Yokoya. Wealthy enough that he never needed to be here at all. Composed in a way that reads less like calm and more like absence. The stillness of someone who has simply stopped feeling most of the things that make other people careless. He carries 2 white mice with him everywhere, handling them with a tenderness he extends to nothing human in the room, and when he speaks at all, it's with something close to admiration for the men history remembers as its most absolute rulers. He builds his side of the game the same way, not through alliances or shared trust, but through a loyalty system where his own teammates are quietly encouraged to spy on each other, to report betrayal, to compete for his approval like subjects rather than partners, a small, elegant system that never actually pays out the way it implies it will. Because his people don't need to trust each other. They only need to fear falling out of favor with him. And fear, unlike trust, doesn't require a single honest moment between anyone to keep functioning. Where Akiyama's alliance ran on shared consequence, and Nao's instinct runs on shared faith, Yokoya's team runs on something closer to a cult with a scoreboard. And the unsettling part is how well it works on people who have spent their whole lives wanting someone, anyone, to tell them exactly where they stand. Akiyama has already outthought a bitter teacher and outlasted a brilliant manipulator. Neither of them prepared him for someone who isn't playing to survive at all. Yokoya is playing because, for maybe the first time in his life, he's found something interesting enough to actually want, and now, looking at him, doesn't see the villain the story seems to want her to see. She sees someone underneath the mice and the ideology who has simply never been given a reason to believe anyone was worth trusting either the same instinct that's already gotten her hurt twice, walking her straight toward a third mistake with her eyes wide open. Because if there's one thing 12 episodes have made clear about Nao Kanzaki, it's that she has never once learned to stop extending her hand to the people. This story keeps warning her not to. 12 episodes ago, this was a story about a girl too honest to survive a lie. What it's actually become is a story about whether that honesty can survive contact with someone who's turned the total absence of trust into a weapon sharper than anything Fujisawa or Fukunaga ever managed to swing at her. Yokoya has never once, in his entire life, lost something he actually wanted to keep, and he's about to find out, in real time, whether he's finally found something worth losing. Subscribe if you want to know what happens when the liar game finally finds an opponent who isn't playing for survival because he's playing for the first time to feel something at all, and the last person who ever made him feel anything is about to be the one standing across the table from him.